Great, my name is Stan, and I welcome you to RYCO TV, Rico TV. And today I'm going to talk to us on a subject that I've titled Fear. Fear. See, fear is like one of the biggest things right now, and the media, the mainstream media is peddling fear, and I don't know why they peddle fear in such a way, but I think it's simply because there's only one agenda, which is simple, which is control. Mind control. How do you control human behavior? You control human behavior when people are afraid. When a person is afraid, it is easy to control that particular person. So fear is an instrument that is used in order to control. You see, when you look into how we have evolved as human beings and how we grew up from being children and stuff, you realize that when you're a child, your parent would try to tell you not to do a particular thing, but probably didn't have a good reason for telling you not to do that particular thing. And maybe even if she had a good reason or he had a good reason, he probably didn't know how to express himself. So what was the greatest excuse? The boogeyman. If you do this, the boogeyman is going to come and get you. And the sad thing is, even today, in our world today, there are plenty boogeymans, you know, and one of the most recent boogeyman is COVID-19. COVID-19 is a boogeyman. And the thing is, the reason why COVID-19 is a boogeyman is simply because it is meant to push you into blind obedience. The moment you're afraid, it is easy for you to obey. The moment you're afraid, it is easy for you to be manipulated. The moment you're afraid, it is easy for the enemy to do with you whatever he wills. So how do you put blind obedience? You put blind obedience or manipulate human behavior by making sure that the person is afraid. And one thing you need to understand is that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but he has given us the spirit of love, power, and a sound mind. Just imagine, we have been given the spirit of power. In other words, we have power over COVID-19. I mean, come to think about it, we actually have power over COVID-19. And guess what? He has given us the spirit of love. The only way we can enforce the plans and the purposes of the living God in our lives is when we operate and function in love. And he has given us a sound mind. God has given us a sound mind. You see, right now you realize that common sense is not even common at all. Why? Because people have been placed in that position, in that place of fear. Everybody's intimidated. They can't use common sense anymore. You know, a simple mathematical problem is taking a toll to work out, and it's just ridiculous, simply because the only way to control human behavior is to get folks intimidated, is to get people scared. The moment a person is afraid, it is easy to control them, and the enemy knows that. So the enemy will introduce fear. And how does he introduce fear? He does what they call lying by statistics. Let me tell you, statistics has been lying to us during this COVID-19. There's been a lot of lying using statistics, and the reason why they would lie with statistics is simply because when you see numbers are real. As far as the human mind is concerned, numbers are real, and people are dying, and this thing is taking lives, and everybody's now intimidated. Everybody is scared. And the moment a person is afraid, it is easy to manipulate them. It is easy to control them. And now that's when now the enemy is able to push his diabolic agenda. Before you realize it, you are queuing up to be vaccinated. Before you realize it, you have a chip in your body. Before you realize it, you have some giant tech guru monitoring your behavior and monitoring your whereabouts, and you are under this control from the enemy. See, the enemy is aware. The enemy is smart. He's not dumb. He knows exactly how to control human behavior. And you got to tell yourself that I am not afraid and I will not be intimidated. You see, you actually have power over COVID-19. You see, you need to realize this, that the same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, if it is alive on the inside of you, guess what it will do? It will revitalize your mortal body. This has got to be your understanding. This got to be your behavior, and this is how you ought to function and operate, where you are not operating and functioning from a place of fear. You see, fear has always been used as an instrument, and it is used as an instrument to control human beings. It is an instrument that is used to control human behavior, and you got to refuse it. Say, I am not afraid, and I will not be afraid, and I refuse to be intimidated. I refuse to be placed in that position where I find myself afraid. It is not the will of God for you to be afraid. You see, us growing up, you realize that when a child is misbehaving and probably not doing what the child must be doing, the parent would always say this, because the parent doesn't know exactly how to tell the child not to do what they're doing, because they don't really have like good excuses, and they probably can't express themselves. Maybe the child will not be able to comprehend, but they knew exactly how to manipulate their children into obedience. And do you know what that is? The boogeyman. If you tell the child about a boogeyman, it is easy for the child to obey. And then there's also another thing that parents used to do in order to push their children into blind obedience, like in Africa. You see, I'm an African. I grew up in Africa, and I remember growing up and my grandparents telling me not to go sit on the roads. It's kind of crazy. When you're a little child, you want to sit on the roads. You see, when you're a little child, you have no idea, so you walk out of the gate. You see, the thing with our homes is that we didn't have gates and stuff. So you'd walk out and sit on the roads and stuff. And we loved sitting on the roads. And this is what my grandmother would always say: if you sit on the roads, you're going to develop boils on your behind. I mean, boils are something that we knew, something that we're familiar with. And the moment you get the idea of saying, oh, if I sit on the roads, I'm going to develop boils, you get off the road, and you don't want to sit on the road because you don't want to develop boils. But the real reason why they would tell us not to sit on the roads, it wasn't because of the boils. No, the reason why they would tell us not to sit on the roads is because they were afraid that cars would come and they would bump us. But now, because we lived during this primitive time, vehicles and cars were not a familiar thing. They were not something that you would tell a child about, because it's not something they would see several times. So because of that, they needed something else that a child was aware of that would make the child blindly obey. And that is exactly the very same thing right now. The enemy is aware that the moment he gets you afraid, it is easier for you to be manipulated. I mean, it's like the same thing. Look at the story of David. Look at the story of, the children of Israel and the Philistines. I mean, you look at it, you realize that Goliath gets up, and guess what he does? Goliath places fear within the children of Israel. And for weeks, I mean, everybody is intimidated. Everybody is afraid. And then shows up this young man who looks at this giant, and he's not intimidated, is not afraid. So guess what he does? He decides to get on and deal with this man. And that's exactly what we ought to do. We need to get up and be like David and refuse to be intimidated by this Goliath, which might be COVID-19 in someone else's life, and which might be something else in someone else's life. In other words, I'm just saying, deal with fear. Do not allow fear to grab a hold of you. Do not allow fear to get a hold of you. You got to resist this fear. Do not allow fear to control your behavior. Refuse that your behavior be controlled by fear. Fear is not of God. It is an instrument that is used by the enemy in order to manipulate your behavior. So refuse it. Refuse to be afraid. Wake up in the morning and say, God, I need the spirit of boldness. God, give me the spirit of boldness. Give me the spirit of boldness. And that's exactly what you need in order for you to be able to go through this life. You've got to be bold, my brother. You've got to be bold, my sister. Fear is not of God. It's of the enemy. It cripples you. It destroys you. It stops you from being effective. You won't do anything of significance the moment you're afraid. So refuse to be afraid. It is not of God.